Greetings and welcome back to room 303 in our Talks with Walt, as we are calling our readings through the deathbed edition of Walt Whitman's Leaves of Grass. We turn now in the Birds of Passage section to a little poem called To You, sometimes referred to as To You Whoever You Are. Now, Whitman actually had three poems called To You. You will maybe recall one of those at the conclusion of at the very beginning section, right, in the inscription section. And then the other one he got rid of. Now, I got to be honest. It is a poem like this, and in fact, it's actually this very poem that led me to want to have these talks with Walt, as I've been calling these, because the level of intimacy is unbelievable. 58 times in this poem, the word you or your will get used. Hey, do you guys remember when we messed around with Brooklyn Ferry? He would ask a question like, what's it like to be holding me right now? And you're just kind of like, whoa, what is that about? We're going to have that same kind of intimate voice here. And I think Whitman would be pleased that we're calling our discussions of his poetry Talks with Walt, because it's an engaging conversation that Whitman wants to have. Now, our assumptions are that you've been with us at learnstrong.net, down that left-hand side, Talks with Walt, our playlist. And you've been working with us from the very beginning. I mentioned inscriptions, and from the opening line when he invites us to come along with him, all the way up to and including, I've given a set of introductory comments to Birds of Passage, as well as we've already done the first two of these poems, Song of the Universal and, of course, Pioneers, O Pioneers. And now we turn to the 3 of 7 within this section. Let's start, first of all, as we like to do with our Nortons, and Nortons will tell us that in 1856 this poem appeared under the title of Poem of You Whoever You Are, and in 1860 as To You Whoever You Are, and then in 1867 it was simply Leaves of Grass number 4, and from 1871 it's carried its present title. He says, although 3 lines have been dropped from the first text, it has undergone but slight revision, and it remains a striking instance of what Whitman's intimate address directly to the reader, somewhat in the manner of teacher to disciple. No question, we will definitely talk about Song of Myself, passage 46 and 47. Here, to finish Norton's, here the teacher encourages one of the divine average to discover and respect his or her own personal identity. Now, I want to just remind you at the very beginning of our conversations, do you remember this set of lines? At the very end of inscriptions, this little poem, To You. Stranger, if you passing meet me and desire to speak to me, why should you not speak to me, and why should I not speak to you? And to me, this is a compelling example of those kinds of echoes that we've been talking about. Back to our T.S. Eliot's Burnt Norton from 4 quartets, my words echo thus in your mind. I also want to point out, this is one of the great waking up poems, and I'm hopeful that you'll read it as such. I had a student recently ask me, you reference so many, Song of Myself and so many other poems, but it's always that Song of Myself, passage 46, that you keep coming back to. And I think it's at the heart of how we read in 303, Leaves of Grass. Surely you can't say anything new. I mean, you've been talking about this poem so much. There isn't anything about that poem that you haven't pointed out. Hey, watch this for a second. Do you remember in Song of Myself, passage 46, I know have the best of time and space and never measured, never will be measured. You remember this? It's not a throwaway to me. This day before dawn, I ascended a hill and looked at the crowded heaven, and I said to myself, when we become the enfolders of those orbs and the pleasure and knowledge of everything in them, shall we be filled and satisfied? Then in my spirit said, this conversation with his spirit, no, we but level that lift to pass and continue beyond. But there's a little phrase that we've not yet pointed out to you. This day before dawn. Now we're going to point this out because you'll remember that famous set of lines that we love to quote in 303 from Thoreau's Walden. We must learn to reawaken and to keep ourselves awake, not by mechanical age, but by, what's he say? Infinite expectation of the dawn that does not forsake us in our soundest sleep. I know of no more encouraging fact than the unquestionable ability of a man to elevate his life by conscious endeavor. Of course, for Whitman, his conscious endeavor was Leaves of Grass. Let's turn to the poem now, and let's just enjoy the way in which Whitman will reach through the pages. And to me, this is amazing. This is why we love Emily Dickinson as well, right? Because these two poets, in Whitman and Emily, have this ability to kind of reach out and grab us to you. Whoever you are, I fear you are walking the walks of dreams. I fear these supposed realities are to melt from under your feet and hands. Even now, your features, joy, speech, house, trade, manners, troubles, follies, costume, crimes, dissipate away from you. Your true soul and body appear before me. They stand forth out of affairs, out of commerce, shops, work, farms, clothes, the house, buying, selling, eating, drinking, suffering, dying. Now we'll look very closely at this, whoever you are. Of course, we've seen this several times. We're going to see it here again in a little bit. Of course, you'll remember it from starting from Palmanac 13 and 14. You'll remember it from Song of Myself 47 as well. Notice he says, I'm afraid, I fear. You are walking in the walks of dreams. That is to say, wake up. We'll get to his poem, Sleepers, later. I fear those, sounding very much like Plato. And you'll remember, of course, our ideas from Republic 6 and 7, form theory, supposed realities. It is a hallmark of Whitman, and I think all great poets and all great artists, that they're constantly challenging us to try to figure out what is real, right? What is real? Notice he calls them supposed realities. And they all melt from under your feet and your hands. And then all of a sudden he gives us a list of 10 things, right? Features, joy, speech. Notice manners is listed there. It dissipates away. You'll remember in Scented Herbage of the Breast, he plays this same game of dissipate. Your true soul and body appear before me. They stand forth. And then he'll give us 12 of these, right? Out of commerce, shops. Notice drinking, suffering. And then he finishes with dying, which takes us back to Song of Myself, passage 6. And then he'll, second time, whoever you are. And now, again, some readers will find this just bizarre, the way he plays this game. Here we are, reading a poet, and he from long ago, and he has this ability to kind of reach out and grab you. Watch how he does this. Whoever you are, now I place my hand upon you, that you may be my poem. Now don't miss it, this place my hand upon you can have religious overtones, it can have sexual overtones, it can have all kinds of interesting overtones. I place my hand upon you. It's the only use in the entire Leaves of Grass where this phrase gets used. That you be my poem. Notice this idea of ontology from our Big Five. Who are you? Whitman asks. Well, yeah, you are an American, but more importantly, you are actually Leaves of Grass. I whisper with my lips close to your ear. And another poem, On the Beach at Night, he'll say, with my lips soothing these, adding, I whisper. So there's all kinds of echoes. I whisper with my lips close to your ear. I have loved many women and men, but I love none better than you. Oh, to use this language that we're so familiar with. He'll use it one more time. I have been dilatory and dumb. By the way, only use of the word dilatory. And it has all kinds of interesting meanings, sub-meanings. I should have made my way straight to you long ago. I should have blabbed nothing but you. Remember his use of blabbed in Crossing Brooklyn Ferry? I should have chanted nothing but you. In other words, I think in few poems in Leaves of Grass are as intimate and as demanding of the reader to say, you are the reason I have done what I have done. And I think in some ways, I mean, I've been asked more than a few times, what's your inspiration for going through every poem of Leaves of Grass? Clearly you're giving a bit of energy to it. And I think a poem like this reminds me, because each of us matter in some profound way. And we forget this, I think. He says, I will leave all, notice his use of the word all the way through Leaves of Grass. I will leave all and come and make the hymns of you. In other words, I'm not interested in hymns about God or hymns about America. Now I'm interested in specifically hymns about you. None, notice his repetition 4 times of none. None has understood you, but I understand you. None has done justice to you, and he loves that word, right? Borrowing it heavily from Plato's, his study of Plato. None has done justice to you. You have not done justice to yourself. You underestimate yourself, he says. And we do have this tendency, don't we, to always talk about, I am not good enough. And of course, if we play that back, you know, each one of those words backwards, I am not good enough, and drop the word enough, I am not good. Whoa. And all of a sudden, that is a line we just cannot speak about ourselves, Whitman says. None but has found you imperfect. I only find no imperfection in you. None but would subordinate you. I only am he who will never consent to subordinate you. I only am he who places over you no master, owner, better. God? He'll come back to this word God one more time. Of course, Song of Myself, passage 48. I have said that the soul is not more than the body. I have said the body not more than the soul. And nothing, not God, is greater to one than oneself is. He's coming back to this. I only am he who places over you no master, owner, better, God beyond what waits intrinsically in yourself. I am amazed that the word intrinsically gets used one and only one time in all Leaves of Grass. It's right here, right now. Now we're going to get Whitman as painter and then Whitman as singer. It's quite remarkable. In other words, this is in some ways his artistic tour de force speaking directly to you, the reader. I have had readers who have been with me all the way since the very opening first word of the deathbed edition of Walt Whitman's Leaves of Grass come. And when they hit this poem, they see it all almost like a full circle. And it's pretty remarkable that it sits right in the center of Leaves of Grass. Painters have painted their swarming groups and the center figure of all from the head of the center group spreading a nimbus of gold-colored light. Hey, do you remember this in Crossing Brooklyn's Ferry? I told you guys I was going to not do too much of this, but do you remember in Crossing Brooklyn Ferry, when he started playing this game about light and the whole idea of light, he says, fly on seabirds, fly sideways or wheel in large circles high in the air, receive the summer sky, you water and faithfully hold it, till all downcast eyes have time to take it from you. Diverge fine spokes of light from the shape of my head or anyone's head in the sunlit water. Do you remember this idea that when painters and American painters would play this game just like Renaissance players and Baroque painters would play this, when you want to show some kind of powerful energy, you will put light around the head. He's playing that game. But he says, I paint myriads of heads. By the way, I paint is only used one time in Leaves of Grass, and it's right here. I paint myriads of heads, but paint no head without its nimbus of gold-colored light. In other words, all humans are divine will be the language of Emerson, and I think Whitman very much borrowed from this. From my hand, from the brain of every man and woman, it streams effulgently, flowing forever. Hear all those F sounds, by the way? Are you ready for this? Effulgently gets used one time in all Leaves of Grass. It's right here, right now. I think, as I've said to you guys many, many times, I think Whitman is having a blast playing the game of writing these poems. I hope we're having a blast reading and enjoying Whitman with them. What is it that he's saying? He is saying, notice the word streams, that idea of flowing, right? We're back to Brooklyn Ferry again. I think this poem reads rather nicely with Brooklyn Ferry. Oh, he comes back to the O. Oh, I could sing. Now Whitman is singer. Such grandeurs and glories about you. Notice, not singing glories about God or about America. Now it's specifically about you. You have not known what you are. You've slumbered upon yourself all your life. You remember what he said in passage 46? Perhaps you've been on it all your life, traveling, and did not know. Right? Perhaps it's everywhere, on water and on land. This idea, again, it's time to wake up. By the way, slumbered only gets used one time in all Leaves of Grass. It's right here, right now. Your eyelids have been the same as closed most of the time. What you have done returns already in mockeries. And then in parenthetics, your thrift, knowledge, prayers, if they do not return in mockeries, what is their return? Now this is a compelling rhetorical question. So, your dreams. When are you going to wake up and start to pursue those dreams? This is his question. It's a compelling question to a reader of Leaves of Grass. And all of a sudden, we're not just reading this poem so that we can know a little bit more about Whitman. As all great art, we're reading the poem so we can know a little bit more about ourselves. And what is it Whitman says? Your eyes have been closed most of the time. You remember in passage 46, I washed the gum from your eyes. You must habit yourself to the dazzle of the light in every moment of your life. So we're coming back to it. The mockeries, he says, now are not you. Underneath them and within them, I see you lurk. thoughts, number 2, uses this word lurk a second time. I pursue you. Now we're going to get some very interesting language. It's almost like the language of chase. We go back to our study of Keats's Ode on a Grecian Urn and the idea of being chased there as one of the drawings on the urn. He says, I pursue you where none else has pursued you. Silence, and now he's going to give us the list. And all of a sudden we begin to wonder, is he talking to me or is he talking to his soul the way he did in Song of Myself, Passage 5, and in a number of other places when he has these conversations with himself? Silence, the desk, the flippant expression, the night, the accustomed routine, if these conceal you from others or from yourself, they do not conceal you from me. All of a sudden, the transparent eyeball of Emerson's essays, we talked about it in earlier lectures at learnstrong.net, especially his essay, Nature, and of course, Oversoul. All of a sudden, now we get a poet who's going to play that game. And then, the language of sexual almost conquest, certainly sexual exploration here. The shaved face, the unsteady eye, the impure complexion. If these balk others, they do not balk me. Notice all this American-like language, balk, and then later it's going to be pluck and pert. We're going to get all these American kinds of usages. The pert appeal, the deformed attitude, drunkenness, greed, premature death, all these I part aside. In other words, I'm going to look past all of your flaws to who you really are. And of course, in him saying this, he is what? Challenging us to do the same of ourselves. And then he comes now to the end of the poem. There is no endowment in man or woman that is not tallied in you. And we've talked about this use of the word tally, of course, used in Song for Occupations as well as Song of Myself, Passage 25. The great Harold Bloom, of course, made a whole lot about this use of the word tally because it does have sexual renderings, no question. I think Whitman's having all kinds of fun. There's no virtue, no beauty in man or woman, but as good is in you. He's literally sticking his tongue out at Plato and, of course, the four cardinal virtues of Republic. No pluck, again, this American language. No endurance in others, but as good as in you. No pleasure waiting for others, but an equal pleasure waits for you. Whitman will say, stop looking around at other people and wishing that your life could be as amazing as theirs. He says, everything that's amazing about anybody you want to pick, you have that seed in you. He uses that word underneath, right? And then he gets personal. As for me, I give nothing to anyone except I give the like carefully to you. And I think the word carefully is the key word of this entire poem. If I had more time, we could go into why I think that. But so you study it your own way, and you see, I think Whitman's trying to be careful in Leaves of Grass, which is why some poems are thrown out at the end, the deathbed edition. I sing the songs of the glory of none, not God. Again, we think of our Nietzsche here, we have to in the Madman passage. Sooner than I sing the songs of the glory of you, whoever you are. Notice all the exclamation points to finish this. Claim your own at any hazard. Take the risk. In other words, these shows of the East and West, we think of Pioneers, oh Pioneers, are tame compared to you. These immense meadows, you thought obviously about America's geography. These interminable rivers, you are immense and interminable as they. These furies, and of course our Greek mythology immediately comes to mind, right? These furies, elements, storms, motions of nature, notice capitalized, to tip his hat to Emerson, he'll do it one more time. Throes of apparent dissolution, throes can have very sexual renderings as well. You are he or she who is master or mistress over the master or mistress in your own right, over nature, again capitalized, elements, pain, passion, dissolution. I've told you guys, this is Whitman's theodicy, the question of why must there be pain, suffering in the world? Stop asking, why did it happen to me? And learn how to ask, why did it happen for me? It's not that we love pain. It's that we have to stop seeing ourselves as the victim in a universe from which we have no control, and rather to take control. And this is obviously this empowering language. And then he uses powerfully the language of slaves. Watch this. The hobbles fall from your ankles. That is to say, the fetters, the things that tie. You find an unfailing sufficiency. We're back to Emerson's self-reliance, no question. Old or young, male or female, rude, low, rejected by the rest. Isaiah 53, for those of you who are biblical scholars, readers, it comes to mind. Whatever you are promulges itself. Then this is that word of promulgates, right? The evolutionary language, right? And now here we are to Circle of Life. Here we are to Song of Myself, Passage 6. Through birth, life, death, burial, the means are provided. Nothing is scanted. Through angers, losses, ambition, ignorance, uses the French word ennui. What you are picks its way. The very best of you will find its way. You just have to have the trust, the faith. At 2A, of course, then you are the great American poem, he will say, and don't let any kind of pain get you down or hurt you. At 2B, I love the repetitions, I love the intimate voice, I love the energy as well of this poem. I love that 58 times he uses the word you in such a short poem. At 3A, well, of course, Emerson and Emily have to come to mind. Their ability to talk directly to you, as well as, of course, Thoreau's We Must Learn to Reawaken. And finally, to own a poem like this, I think read it on your own several times and then ask, is it possible you've been asleep? Your eyelids have been closed and you just didn't realize it. When will resurrection happen? When will you wake up? It's a fair question that I think Walt asks. Thank you.